Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas. I'll be joined soon by my very dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're talking about being students on the embodied spiritual path and what does that actually mean? So what's a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace all of the things, the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? We're attempting to sort that out for ourselves here on the show. So happy 2017, everyone. We missed you while we were on our break, although, of course, it was lovely to chat with you all on Facebook and Instagram while we weren't putting out episodes for a couple of weeks. So it's a new year. And this is the time when people like to talk a lot about resolutions. Feels like fresh start time. But why talk about New Year's resolutions when we can talk about the big, juicy root ball underneath all of that goal setting, which is karma? So what seeds are you planting? What seeds are you watering? And how did the word karma get so kind of overused and misunderstood? We're diving into all that today. If you're enjoying the show, we would be really delighted if you left a review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe now. We just set it up to hear updates on any events that we might have coming up. And one last note, those of you who are new to the show, we have a little bit of the potty mouth. So if there are kids around, you might want to pop in some headphones. Okay, here we go. Hey, Vanessa.
Hello, darling.
So recently, I spent a day hanging out with my son and my boyfriend's son. They're the same age. They're 10. And for whatever reason, they got into the habit that day of using the word karma constantly. It wasn't coming from us. And so they were using it in a 10-year-old way, which is as punishment, you know? So it's like, whatever, you spill the water when you're pouring it, it's karma, you know, like for whatever, you know, there's something you did earlier in the day. And now your karma is that when you're pouring the glass of water, you're going to spill it and get your shirt wet or whatever. And it just like became this sort of meme that kept threading through our day. That's karma. That's karma. So of course, the poor things by the end of the day were subjected to me being like, you know, karma doesn't mean punishment from some god that sits up in the clouds and throws down lightning bolts when you're bad. And whatever, they don't need to metabolize that, or they do, or whatever. But for our purposes here on Bliss and Grit, it is a word that has been taken in the West and digested within a dominantly Judeo-Christian culture to mean there's this personified God that's outside of our world. Like, let's say, take the extreme example, sitting up in the clouds, looking down upon us with furrowed brow. And if we do something bad, then karma is going to come and strike us to right the wrong that we've done. So you and I both know that's not the case. And I think it would be a fun kind of definition of terms, exploration of terms episode to talk karma.
Yeah, also because there's some really juicy lessons around karma. Like the way that I was taught in the Buddhist lineage as well is that, you know, once you understand the principles of karma, so to speak, you can work towards your betterment. You can work towards improving your situation, right? So it's not only like a cool term to understand so that when teachers are talking and you're listening to a YouTube clip of the Dalai Lama or something, you're hip to getting the underlying principle. But really, it's also a philosophical system of how you can work towards living a more happy, fulfilled, and then possibly even enlightened life. Mm-hmm. So that's the other cool thing about karma. And this was really like just the other day, your kids?
Yeah, we took a day and went into the city and had like a museum day. So it was one of those really long days, like train rides, lots of time for conversation. So I kept, Karma, 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 karma. And finally, we sat down at the kitchen table at the end of the night. And I was like, all right, I just can't take it anymore. I have to say it. Karma doesn't mean you're being punished.
It's so funny because I feel like in our last episode, I know we just mentioned karma.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just came up. Like we just said it.
True.
So wonderfully and aptly and non-coincidentally timed, I think.
Yes.
So I guess maybe the best way we can start to talk about it is what do we think from our experience karma is? And then maybe we can kick around some of the Buddhist philosophies of how you can work with the system of karma. Because even up until, I want to say I was in my 30s, I mean, solidly in my 30s, I kind of thought the same thing as your boys, as your 10-year-olds, just the way that you understand karma is like, when you commit a wrong action, there will be wrong results. So even though at some point I had separated from the idea that there was some, heavenly father sitting up above judging me, it was still as if like the universe was boomeranging my bad actions back.
Yeah.
And I guess where it gets interesting is that that's not wholly wrong. There's something to it. There's a reason why we derived that definition and why it's such a kind of common cultural word now. It's like, so the fact that your 10-year-olds are saying it is
I know. I was like,
hilarious.
This is funny.
Yeah, kind of hilarious. So I don't know. Do you want to start saying what you think your definition of karma is?
Yeah, well, I would love to actually start by going back to something that I've said, and I've said it in other episodes, and it's worthy of clarification because I said the Judeo-Christian culture. And I've talked about this before, like this idea in Judeo-Christian culture that we're born in sin, that we're born flawed. And I want to bring it up because it's actually something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about and reading about. And I also don't want people to feel like I'm being shamey about that or putting down Christianity or, Jewish traditions or the Bible. And I've been reading a lot more about Jesus and just getting really interested in that. So we are all talking about the same thing in different words. And the word sin, the way it was translated, it originally, I think Aramaic or maybe in Greek, originally it was to miss the mark is what sin meant. And then we took sin and interpreted through human beings. We decided it meant making mistakes or errors or doing a wrong thing and that you're born flawed, right? But actually it's talking about the exact same thing that we're talking about in Buddhism, which is to miss the mark, meaning, and it always comes back to this, and our teacher Kieran Trace is really masterful with this, it's doing things that are not true. Not true for you, not true to you. You know what I mean? So there's no dogmatic rule book, as much as we want there to be. It's about what's true for you, the individual, in the moment, which could change from moment to moment. Let's say something very simple, which we all know isn't true, but I think that we, metabolize it this way sometimes. Like you should never hurt someone's feelings. Something really simple. The simple sort of young idea, right? You should never hurt someone's feelings. Try as hard as you can to not hurt someone's feelings. And it's like, well, in certain circumstances, it might be really true to say for you something that might feel hurtful to that person. If that's what's genuinely true for you, obviously you would say it in your least spewing vile way. But if that's what's true for you, then it gets to that truth heals thing, right? Like then it must be useful for them to be delivered in that way. So we have to always be coming back to our own right action, which comes down to the individual and the moment. Did I just meander too far afield? Does that make sense?
No. It made total sense. It just gave me so many different thoughts in my head at once. It almost like clogged up my brain for a second. I think that the Buddhist idea that we were born pure is one of the most powerful ones. And what's interesting is even there, I find a bit of a conflict that I haven't had the kind of, I guess, teachings on, where it's like, we're born pure, but we're also born with karmic imprints.
Yeah.
And that's both true. And I think pure is because we are source, we are empty, we are Buddha nature, we are Dharmakaya. Like at any moment, we can have that realization and recognition and live there. You know, we are there already. And yet we're born with these karmic imprints and almost, you could say, tendencies. So some of the way I began to understand karma is through the seed planting metaphor, which I think is really interesting. It's like your actions, your thoughts, essentially your experiences, right? And we can look at thoughts as an experience. We can look at feelings as an experience. And we can also look at what Brooke says to me and what I say back as experiences. So within that, you're experiencing things. And what happens is as you experience things, you start to plant these little seeds, seeds of action, seeds of thought, seeds of belief. And it's like if you imagine your mind like a garden, whatever seeds you plant eventually begin to grow.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like if I plant a daffodil seed, I get daffodils. And, you know, if I plant a sunflower seed, I get sunflowers. And there's nothing confusing about that. And that's kind of how, like on a very basic level, we can start to look at karma. And it's really on the mind level, because remember, when we're looking at things like Buddhism, I'm sure many, many other traditions, but from Buddhism, like we're all one, right? So anything that's happening in my world is happening in my mind, right? It's all happening on my mind level. It's from the Buddhist perspective, the world is mirroring it. So I'm planting these seeds, and you might think about like, let's say my insecurities. So if I grow up young, and when I grew up and my dad's, let's say, yelling at me, and my mind interprets it as I'm bad, I'm not good, I plant that seed. That thought plants that seed. Now, the question is how much I water it. And if I keep watering it, I say it over and over again, or more and more experiences happen that kind of reflect it, the seed gets deeper and it gets more sown. And then eventually I have a garden of I'm insecure. And that then starts to show up more and more in my thoughts, more and more in my actions. And then the more I believe it and buy into it, I plant more seeds. And this is like the very basic beginning of talking about karma. And what's cool when you were talking about the Judeo-Christian traditions, it's like I've read the New Testament a lot. You know, I grew up Catholic. I wasn't highly religious, although I was very closely connected to God. But I really got into Jesus in my later years. I really got into the New Testament, especially the Gospel according to Thomas, if any of you out there like the more mystical Christian traditions. And like, we know Christ said, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
Right?
All same, different traditions. Yeah.
Same, different traditions. So we take that in that punitive way that you said, right? Like you reap what you sow. The energy of those words have come to mean like you do bad shit and bad things are coming for you. Yeah. Christ is on your back. And then we're confused because then why do good things happen to good people? I mean, bad things happen to good people, right? Mm-hmm. Then we're shocked. Like, how could Princess Di die in a car accident? She was a good person, as if like bad things can never happen to good people. Because in our mind, it's you reap what you sow means bad things, bad actions create bad things, right? So a couple of things just to like wrap up my point. I think it's cool that you'll see this everywhere. I heard once the Reverend Michael Beckwith talk about manifesting what you wanted in a way that explicitly followed the 4 Buddhist steps to karma. I'll talk about those later, but he's a reverend. And also you hear it from Christ. So this is kind of universal. And what they're trying to get at in a less simplistic way is that what you plant seeds for grows. Now that means challenging things, beautiful things, loving things. In fact, is quite neutral. Like, in fact, the universe is quite neutral like that. It's like, ooh, you want a sunflower? Here you go.
Right. What do you want to give birth to? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so karma is a verb, which I think is a very important thing to put a point on. It's not a thing, it's a movement. It's in action. It's in experience. It's lived. And just to go with your sunflower analogy a little bit, we often don't know what the seeds are that we're planting. So all of this comes from the delusion of separateness, which is what to sin meant. To miss the mark meant to not understand unity consciousness, which most of us don't, So to sin meant to live from the ego mind. And so within that delusion of separateness, you often don't know what seeds you're planting. So an example from my life that I can think of straight off is like when I was pregnant and when my son was born, I was so motivated to change my financial situation that I started, goal setting. So I'm going to do this and I'm going to take action towards my goal. So in my mind, my separate self mind, I'm thinking, I see this problem and good for me. I'm doing a good thing. I'm choosing to take deliberate action towards solving the problem. But I'm solving the problem still from my separate ego thinking mind. And I'm swimming against the stream by forcing myself to do things that I think is going to solve the problem. But of course, so I think I'm planting the seeds of abundance, security, stability, success, but I'm actually planting the seeds of desperation, of fear, of anxiety. And it was one of those experiences and I grew a desperation, fear, and anxiety plant. And then once I had the plant, I was like, oh, I thought that the seeds in those packets were different. And
Right.
Sometimes it'll happen. It's not until the plant matures that you're like, oh, I see now. Those were the seeds I took out of that bag. I thought the bag was labeled differently. So we often don't actually even know what we're planting.
Yeah, well, and that's what's interesting is because then when the plant grows, you're like, life hates me.
Yes.
God just hates me.
Right. I tried
instead
so
of
hard.
understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, I tried so hard. And it's because we had a misunderstanding about the mechanics. And now I remember this is what we were talking about last week. And I think we must have touched on this in the episode of the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially it's not just your actions, it's the intentions that fuel it. Actually, moreover, it's the intentions, it's the motivations that move you into action. Then, okay, so let me give you the steps. There's a teacher who wrote the book called The Diamond Cutter. It's Geshe Michael Roach. So Geshe Michael Roach used to talk about karma a lot, and he breaks it down in this really user-friendly way. I'm going to try to describe it to the best of my memory, but y'all can also look at the book. But basically, he said, let's say, for example, I was a Chinese medicine practitioner. I talked about this last week. Back in my 20s, when I was doing Chinese medicine, I was very woe is me. I'm exhausted. I'm giving, and I'm not really getting as much back as I'm putting out, right? And I'm in deficit mode, and I don't understand what's happening to me, right? Like, I'm a good person. I have very good intentions, and I'm helping people all day long. So if karma was a real thing and I was doing good deeds, why aren't I having a flood of goodness and abundance coming back to me, right? In whatever form, money, love, patience, like, why do I still feel like it's just a trickle? And Geshe Michael Roach really addressed this for me. He helped me start to understand this, because what he was talking about is that there are, I'm sure many of you listening relate to this because we have a lot of practitioners who listen to the show, that it's about two things, first and foremost, besides your action. It's the movement that drives the action, and it's how you feel afterwards. So he said, if you want anything to happen in your life, so let's say, Brooke, let's say you were single and you were lonely and you were wanting more love in your life. You were wanting more companionship in your life. He said, the way to get it is you go out and you help someone else who's lonely and wants more companionship in your life. Maybe you go to an old person's home and you spend time with them, or, you spend time with a friend who's been alone a lot. So that's your action, right? But he's like, here's the most important part, because like on a very probably like Hinayana Buddhist belief, maybe Mahayana Buddhist belief, that's karma. You just do good deeds. And it says, but then it can take a lifetime or 2 or 3 before it actually changes the tides. That's how like slow the movement can be. But if you want to tap in this life, very Vajrayana, then this is the practice. Okay. So he'd say, so you do the good deed, you spend the time, right? So I'm planting seeds of love by giving love to someone else, right? And generosity. Then I go home at night, I sit on my bed, and I think about this person I just spent time with. And I think, oh, how beautiful their face was. Oh, how nice it was when I gave them those flowers and they lit up. Oh, how beautiful it was that I had that opportunity to share that with them. And I seal the action with goodness, with feeling great about what I had done and that level of connection that flowed. And he said, that's the secret sauce. If you don't do that, then the karmic ripening is very, very slow. Now, yes, that's the more alchemical level of things. I mean, just from a simple neuroscientific level, what you see is what you believe. So the more you keep, let's say, if you feel like you live in a stingy world, but you're always coming at your world from desperation and fear, as you were saying, Brooke, like grasping at things, you literally are just planting seeds to reinforce those neurological pathways that say desperation, frustration, life's not enough, right? So we can see from like a neuroscience level that, but from this like mystical level, from this energetic level, the key was you have to feel good going in and good about what you do, which you really can only do if it's true for you, probably. Right. I mean, that's probably to circle back to what you said. But I think that's the secret sauce, because how many of us go and we do, like we said last week, we do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and because life demands it, or my parents need it, or my clients they're really needing this from me. If I don't give it to them, who else would? But we don't sit and savor that. We don't sit and feel good, which even neurobiologically would switch the whole karmic pattern. So I thought that was interesting. And that karmic teaching, which changed my life, because it's like, if you want goodness, you plant goodness. And it could be very specific. If you want health, if you want happiness, if you want companionship, if you want money, he was very specific about that. So it's not just about bad. It's just, what you plant grows. And that was the exact same teaching I heard the Reverend Michael Beckwith give.
Very interesting. And you can't just, my opinion, you can't just act, because action is the favorite domain of the ego mind. And the ego mind is a fucking trickster all day long. You have
all day, every day.
All day, every day. Shape-shifting the shit out of shape-shifting and telling you that you're acting from love when you go to the nursing home, and you're thinking love when you go home and think about this beautiful person. So you have to also listen. And listening, in my opinion, I'm not alone in this though, is the domain of the body. So you can't just fabricate, in my example of when I'm trying to make this financial shift because I'm pregnant and I'm about to have a baby, or when I had a newborn. I can't just take actions towards that and decide I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Okay, checkbox. I'm going to start this kind of business. Okay, yes, it's a good idea. And this person over here told me it's a good idea. So I'm going to move towards it and keep, checking off the boxes on my to-do list. You have to also listen. We talked about this in our last episode, thinking about things as an exchange. Inhale, exhale. It's got to have the two sides. It can't just be acting out what you've decided, or even acting out feeling, right? Like sitting down and feeling these feelings towards a person. There's a listening, and the body will give you a no, thank you, please. And the body will give you a green light. And it's the clench, unclench. It's the delicious yes. So clench, unclench comes from Martha Beck. And delicious yes is Kieran Trace, one of our teachers. So that is the other thing. And I feel like karma, we're planting karmic seeds that are going to not yield maybe the most delicious crop when we're not listening to what the body tells us. So I can come up with an idea in my head about a project that's going to bring me in X amount of dollars and free up a certain amount of time for me to have a maternity leave, say, and stay home with my newborn son. But if I just act out the ideas without listening to my body giving me, and it's completely somatic, which is why we say clench, unclench. It's completely it feels delicious in the body. Your whole body feels like it gets bigger and softer. It feels like green light. Or, and this is where it can get very, very tricky because the resistance can be more subtle, particularly if the thinking mind, the ego mind, is being very loud about how great your idea is and how great your strategy is to get to your goal. So we can unconsciously plant karmic seeds that aren't going to ripen into the yummiest fruits by not listening as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect, in my humble opinion, I suspect that the deeper part of that teaching of karma that I just shared really is just follow your truth, like trust life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just trust life.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, since that's so hard, like even for myself sometimes, like especially when you're pushed up against like your core beliefs and like these kinds of like really deep karmic patternings, it can even be hard to feel somatically clench, unclench, like, the brain can be spinning so much. And so I suspect that some of those teachings is to start to give you more access. Because then like I'm feeling good, like, okay, I'm doing things that are aligned because I can't feel good after if I can't do something that's aligned. And so it's like starting to give you practical ways, but that the truth of even those steps is just follow truth. Because when you trust life, there is this rightness, it doesn't necessarily feel good for me always in the same way as like, I don't know, it's like a sunny day and I'm going to the beach and I hit no traffic, like this certain kind of like delight. It just feels right. Like, right. When truth happens. So I think it's that. And I think if I'm not misunderstanding this teaching, I think Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and Reggie Ray would both say that karma really is created, I guess. Karma is created through unmet experience. Through unmet experience. You could even say unprocessed, but I think unmet is more appropriate. And I think this is getting at what you were just saying, Brooke, because if there's something that life is moving through you and you are resisting it, that is a force, right? We have to resist movement if movement is coming, right? It's like if you have to go to the bathroom really bad and you want to shake your legs and you just like clamp it down, or like you're going to cry and someone says, stop crying, and you have to like tighten your jaw and like, when movement from life is coming through us and it's not what our thinking ego brain wants, we resist it, right? I don't want to feel this feeling. I don't want this grief. I don't want this anger at someone. I can't handle this. I was just talking to a friend the other day about like some of the stuff that's been up in my life and having to move. And even the way the ego brain works is funny, is it's like, can you just slow it down? Like if I could just get like 3 more months to like take my time, that'd be great. Like we're constantly using this ego brain to resist life's movement, right? But anything that we resist, AKA anything unmet, anything we can't acknowledge, anything we shove down deep into the body, anything that we can't face, like even if we have, let's say, a conflict with someone and we just can't face it, we like feel too scared, even though it's right for us and we resist it. well, then that plants seeds for more conflict, more misunderstanding, more lack of communication. It further reinforces the fact that you should be afraid of those things, right? All of those things happen. And I think that's part of where meditation comes in on a karmic level. If we talk about meditation from that karma level, is as you sit and you meditate with your body, in particular, things arise. Feelings that you had stored, memories, images. I've even had past lives come up to be witnessed. And really, it's developing that like unflinching gaze, that non-judgmental, open, unflinching gaze, as all of these previously unmet experiences come forward. And when you can do that in your life, when something can happen, you and I over this last couple of years have had some crazy things happen, even since we've been practicing diligently. When you can now meet them with just this unflinching, like, oh, there you are. Okay, truth, kind of gaze, I think you can heal the karmic patterns. Yeah. It's like you experienced things like that too, right? Recently, where it's like you just stop planting the seeds and it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's a beautiful movement, to sit in meditation is really just a chance in a very noisy world that's really good at thinking and acting. It's a chance to really mature your listening skills or hearing skills, and by which I don't mean of the ears, it's like you said, these experiences, these knowings, these things just arise, and it shows up in events in your life too, as you and I both well know. As opportunities to let the experience actually move through, and to meet it in a different way. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately on a more micro level. Micro's maybe the wrong word, but I'm trying to be aware of it in a more moment-to-moment way. So I can think about it in terms of the big things, a project or a conversation I need to have with my partner or a parent or, things like that. But it can even be something simple, like I'm at the grocery store. And as an example of like one different day to the next, maybe one day as I'm going through the checkout, I just feel moved to say something to the woman checking me out. Something easy, like, you look so beautiful today, or, oh my God, thank you so much for giving me that reusable bag for free. That's so helpful. Doesn't matter what the content is, but I'm genuinely moved to say it. Then I should say it. And that means it's meaningful in the world. Maybe a different day I'm going through the checkout aisle and I feel like I should smile politely and say something nice. But what I really feel is that I just am feeling super introverted and I don't even need to meet this person's gaze. Well, then I need to listen to the knowing that in that particular moment, what's most useful, not just for myself, but for the world, is to not sow another seed of forced politeness, but to be genuine to myself and be like, I'm tired and feeling really introverted. So it's not always about these, I think we like to think of it in terms of like big, giant, pivotal events, but it's about the whole weave, the whole fabric of the moments that happen, and trying to see, like, can you be true in all of the moments? Can you be more rooted in the present tense and just let the experiences be? It's the trusting your life thing again and again and again. We'll always come back to that. Your life has something to offer you and to move through you. Can you let that happen? Can you really listen?
I think it's great that you're bringing it back to the moment-to-moment observation. Because again, we're all learning these, and in different cultures, you may have the idea of karma since you're, a bebe, and you're taking that on a different way. We're learning them, and like a typical Western mind, we make them big and grand the same way as we set big goals, and everything is, future oriented. And if I'm going to help the world, I have to do it with thousands of people, not just like 5 people close to me, that kind of thinking. So I think it's good to bring it back to moment, because even the example you gave, it's not little. it's like, let's say, for example, you're feeling introverted, as you were saying, and you don't want to be in exchange with somebody. If you force yourself into exchange with somebody, the message you're getting back is, don't trust yourself. Mm-hmm. Your movements aren't right. Don't follow life. Don't follow yourself. Make people happy. It's your job to put on a happy face, right? So on and so forth. And if at the same token, you don't allow yourself to give a compliment, it's the same thing. It's like, you're not good enough. Don't speak unless spoken to, whatever those belief systems are that at that moment create that inhibition or resistance. So it's so not little, because it's really just us meeting us, meeting us, meeting us, meeting us over and over and over again. And in that way, the funny thing about this oneness talk is it can begin to seem as if it's narcissistic, but it is just so useful in this regard to recognize that life is just mirroring you. That's karma. It took a long time for me to give up the idea that life's teaching you. And that's kind of that like big dog sitting up in the sky, like writing out a curriculum for Vanessa. It's not that life's teaching me, although there's wonderful opportunity to learn and grow. It's that life is simply mirroring. And if I have eyes that are open enough, as you were saying, I see this bush, I'm like, oh, Lord, I thought I planted, an abundance bush, and like I planted a desperation plant. And okay, so now what do I need to do to shift that? Right. And that's very different than thinking, well, life's just teaching me a lesson.
Right,
and
exactly. So, I screwed up and now reap what you sow. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so, if I was to look at, let's say, my health issues right now living in Miami, I could just stay years and years, right? Because life's just teaching me a lesson of how to put up with suffering or how not to identify with my body or, and it's like really actually more life is just mirroring. It's mirroring my fears around health, or it's mirroring my feeling I have to stay stuck for my family because I have to sacrifice for love. Like it's more like that. And so I think once you start to understand some of these principles of karma, it's softer, right? Because you could just be like, holy shit, okay, let's lay my life out, right? I have relationships, I have health, I have this, I have money. And like, where's their stuckness? Mm-hmm. Where does it feel inhibited? And then, wow, well, what's underneath that's driving that? And we have to, I want to hear what you have to say about that, but just don't let us forget, because we have to talk about illness and collective karma and make a couple of caveats. Okay.
Okay. Write that down though, because my brain's going to go.
Just don't wrap up until I do. I'll be very unsatisfied.
Yeah, I gotcha. Totally. Gosh, now I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep talking.
Go nuts. I'm like, no, but
since
now
I ruined it anyway. No. The trick is, as we talk about all the time, because we love people and we have felt ashamed because of spiritual belief systems in our past. The thing we talk about all the time is like, it's true, but then why am I sick? Or why do children suffer? Or, why do these innocent beings? And to some extent, perhaps we'll talk about what we bring into this lifetime, some past life stuff. And mind you, we're not experts on this topic, so we're just giving our humble opinions. But I think we can't underestimate a few things. One is that everything we plant is primarily unconscious.
Yeah.
Primarily. It's why life mirrors it for us, because you can't see what you can't see. Those things that have been repressed, those things that are just like the air you breathe, they're so normal you don't think to question them. They are the ones that are so deeply ingrained that they're repopulating themselves. Mm-hmm. So as you said, you don't even always know what you're planting, and that's when you're being conscious. Yep. But generally speaking, some of these things were passed down to us through our lineage. Some of these things are our parents' fears. They are our grandmother's issues. We have belief systems that can come because Some of my clients, for example, their grandparents were in the Holocaust, and that has an impact on us.
Yeah.
That creates impressions, it creates beliefs, and those are handed down if they're not healed or resolved. And that goes into the unconscious. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the intergenerational trauma can show up. It can show up in our mirrors. And it's not because you've done something wrong. And it's not because your belief systems are like you chose to create a belief system at some point. I mean, the fact of it all is you never chose what beliefs to create, what feelings to have, what experiences you'll meet. So on that level, we have to acknowledge the unconscious mind. And there's just some things we're not going to get a grip on, maybe in this lifetime, or maybe you will. And that's the part that is unaccountable. There's also collective karma, at least on the Buddhist side. And I wonder what teachers like Kieran would say about this. I haven't spoken to her about it, but the way the Buddhists think about it is there's collective karma, and you can think about family karma, which we could link back to that idea of intergenerational trauma. But it's like New York City has a karmic path it's on. Mm-hmm. The earth, people think that the earth itself has its own karmic path that it is going through. Miami, the United States, Australia, like every culture you're in, it has certain thoughts, certain beliefs, certain energies, certain momentums,
yep.
Certain physicalities that are influencing you, right? So I think when it comes to karma, a lot of us wonder like, well, then why did I get breast cancer? Mm-hmm. Was I a bad person? Why is my child suffering? How could you say that my child did something wrong? Because these are clearly things that challenge us or feel uncomfortable, and sometimes are even fatal. And I think that's where our question becomes like, how can good things happen? I mean, bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to look at, besides the past life thing, which we, maybe could bring in now as well, we have to look at the collective momentum, and we have to understand that there are just these unconscious cellular karmic patterns that are just part of being human that we may or may not get to in this lifetime.
Yeah. The shame infection in our culture is, just cut so deep. And I'm so grateful to people like Brene Brown who are taking that monster up from underneath the carpet so we can see its face. And it's one of the ways that Eastern teachings become very troublesome, is that Eastern culture doesn't have the same dark history with shame that we have. And so they get interpreted in these strange ways or in these narcissistic ways. And there are really beautiful Western spiritual teachers like Adyashanti, like Eckhart Tolle, who I think are doing an exceptional job of sort of dismantling the shame virus and still talking about, unity consciousness and no I and things like this. So it's really important that none of these things are pointing to shame, blame, your fault. And also, we don't have to get it all together. It's like, I remember going on a retreat with a teacher in the Dharma Ocean lineage, Sarah Miriam. And she started one of her talks on the final day just saying that. And it was just like, you could feel that room flood with relief.
Yeah, like collective exhale.
Oh my God. It's like, you don't have to get it all together. You don't have to fix it all. You don't have to figure it out. And it's just like, like permission to just be whatever you actually are.
And you're not human. Right. Just be human.
Exactly. You're not always chasing down the spiffiest version of yourself or the most disidentified, I understand that I'm God self, whatever it is. We need to remove the sort of goal attachment and just be more loving towards ourselves, which I know we've all, it's like collective eye roll. We've heard that so many times, but like, it's really,
but like, just do it.
I know, but just if you could just not have to fix anything, but what you need to fix is loving yourself more. No, I'm just kidding. But like exploring the And this is where, again, for me, it comes back to listening. Like, as soon as I get up to the, that scene of the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, my ego brain behind the curtain, trying to fix things, control things, manipulate things, achieve things, I'm going nowhere. But if I can just sit and feel what's actually going on in me right now, everything starts to soften. Yeah, that.
I agree. And, there is an Eastern philosophy, a lot of looking at yourself in the equation, a lot, right? Because if everything is one, then everything you see is a reflection. And sometimes they'll say you are the reality. There's a lot of that. And maybe that's where it's easy to feel shame, is because we get the part where it's about me. We just don't get the part that it's about oneness. So if it's about me and these things are showing up in my life that are unpleasant, to say the least, then I have done something wrong. And it's just that the problem is we're only getting a part of that equation. Like, it's about me. We're not getting it's about me and everything is one and you are pure and you are life and like flow with source and the rest of the good news of that statement, so to speak. And also, how I feel about this, like, we both feel the same. It's like, just be human. Like, we're not going to get out of this alive. The human journey, right? Like, it's not, this body that is Vanessa, is not moving on. Well, maybe I'll get a diamond body because I'll be that enlightened. But
yeah,
in
obviously.
most cases, this body is not moving on. And we're going to have a human process. So there was no way to really get around some of these human things, And you look at teachers like Adyashanti that, people really admire and who does brings beautiful teachings into the world. And he had a real sickness, right? And when we expand our lens, let me give you this metaphor that I got from Alan Watts years ago that really, really helped. If you haven't watched Alan Watts on YouTube, beautiful. But he was basically saying, like, if we look through a microscope, and I was looking at the cells of the human body through a microscope, it would look like war. You'd see like some cells eating others and like destroying, and it would look like annihilation. And that when you pulled back to a greater level of magnification, you would see me and my wholeness, my whole body in harmony. Maybe you'd even see me dancing and you'd say, oh, what profundity, right? So he said, life is like that. It's all happening, and it depends on the level of magnification that you're viewing it. And so when we're sick or we're dying or we're facing something or we're losing someone we care about or heartbreak, all of these different states, we can get very narrow in our perspective, right? And it feels like I must have done something bad, or God doesn't love me, or how could I deserve this, or, that kind of thinking. And it's also, part of it is that it's inexplicable, this dance of the universe where stars are always forming and collapsing. And part of it is that we don't yet understand the full picture. Adyashanti's sickness led to his breakthrough. We don't understand that there's this dance that's also going on, and past lives coming in like this. We won't talk about too much because I can only talk about it from an intellectual place, although I kind of remember some past lives. But the past lives, it's like maybe I came in with body karma and I have health issues. That's how Kieran sees it. Mm-hmm. I can only speak to someone else's experience of me like that. But that's the inexplicable. So it's just part of the dance of being human, and where you can start to sit with all of this is like, okay, just observing when you move towards truth, observing when you resist, observing when you do things out of like a service-oriented mindset that's begrudging versus when you do things and then you feel really good having connected with someone, observing, I guess, if you look at your life and you go, damn, there's these really catastrophic things happening, just observing like, where could this be a reflection to me of something that I could heal? Not so that I feel bad, but so I feel empowered.
Right.
That's how it is for me. It's empowering. Like, whoa, okay, it's not just a victim of my circumstance. I can look at this and I can be with this in a way that creates relationship and mutuality, and then therefore everything can soften.
Yeah, we can come back to our agency and at the same time understand that there's this big zoom out that can happen, and we don't really know what's in our own best interest. Actually, our ego mind likes to pretend it does all the time, and we also don't know the seasoning that we're getting, all the flavorings we're getting from our life experiences, even the really profoundly painful ones, are going to hopefully serve in some way, which doesn't mean don't have agency and hang out with suffering when you don't need to hang out with suffering. But if they've happened, if those experiences moved through and they're a part of your story, I mean, I'm at a point now where I can look back at even the really, really painful things, and even things that say I take or would take, personal responsibility for and feel regret about. And I'm just like, God, that's such useful seasoning for me. The way that I have compassion and the way that I see the world now because of those things. And Adyashanti, same thing. Like, here's somebody who had very profound awakening at a really young age. It would be very easy to just be, quote, drunk on emptiness, unquote, for your whole life and just kind of not be in the human condition. But he's this gorgeous spiritual teacher who can be really compassionate of and in the human condition. And he keeps having these, very painful health conditions. I'm sure that's really helpful seasoning for him to do his right work in the world, So it's always both and.
Yeah. And I guess, really, whether something is good or bad, successful or unsuccessful, all of that really depends on your goal. So, if your goal is to get out of here alive and be happy every day, you're going to have a certain amount of struggle meeting that, right?
Yeah.
If your goal is to get closer to God, Ram Dass, after he had a stroke, talked about it as a really profound experience. It humbled him. It helped him ask for help. And he felt like it brought him tremendously closer to God and to Maharaji and his teacher. So, if your goal is to get closer to God, if your goal is to be present, however it would resonate best in your system, then challenges are not also necessarily problems, right? There are opportunities, even though from an egoic human mind, there's plenty of things we would not want or wish upon each other. That's part of it. That's all grist for the mill, right? And it's all part of being human. So, #BeHuman. Maybe we can get a little movement going on that.
That sounds like good stuff. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website and scroll down, you're going to see each episode's separate post, and the resources are within the individual episodes. You can also come play with us on the social media channel of your choice. We are most frequently at Instagram and Facebook, and we actually respond pretty quickly there. So it's a nice place to chat. We're Bliss and Grit at both of those spots. And if you want to support the show, there are a few things you could do. You could write us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our Facebook page, which, as I mentioned, is Bliss and Grit. We also have a new subscribe form on the website, which is blissandgrit.com, and you can sign up there if you want to stay in touch with us. Obviously, we're not being spammy or weird, but we do have a bunch of good stuff brewing for the community, so that's a way that you'll be able to hear about it as soon as it's available. We do love hearing from all of you, and it also just, all this stuff helps other people to find the show. If technology isn't your thing, but you're really enjoying the show, well then please tell your friends that you think might also resonate with the kind of stuff we're talking about. And big gratitude, as always, to those who've written reviews already. So here's one from DMMAH on iTunes, quote, "Loving the conversation between Vanessa and Brooke and all that they share. They offer thoughtful reflection and an authentic response grounded in real experience, scholarship, and practice. The stuff that gets into the heart mind and works into the mix of things." Thank you so much. We certainly hope so. And we'll be back next week.